Don't be shy.
This is dramatic lighting, by the way. This is wonderful.
It makes you guys just look so handsome.
Come on.
Who's going first?
All right,
What's your favorite color?
On a scale of 1 to 10, how awesome are you? And you know, please, let's be realistic.
Why should we limit it to 10?
And when you're this good looking, humility is everything. So I can't.
Have you won humility yet? Have you are you a level 11 of humility?
Troy?
Well, I mean, the scoring
What
that
if
we
the
use
humility
is more of
DLC?
a-
Who's got a question?
Yeah, come on, throw the real stuff
How
at
does
us.
it feel to cover two of the most iconic characters? More or
Surreal.
less ever in comics.
It doesn't sink in for me until these kinds of things take place. When somebody goes, Roger, Batman, and you go, what? Because this is who I see. This is who I am, and I operate when I'm recording in a small box with a microphone, and I try to make sure that the people on the other side of the glass are pleased with what I'm doing for them as my job. And then all of a sudden, like a year later, you go, oh, that's right. That was for this, and so it's insane. And right from the get-go, both of us were just like thrilled and also kind of going, all right, we want to do this right. Let's make sure we get it right. It's an honor, and it's surreal for me.
Well, we're both fans too, and we're both gamers, so we understand that we're stepping into a franchise that's one of the highest rated video games of all time. So with that comes an inherent reverence for the characters, for the franchise, and my initial reaction was to run. I said no to begin with. And fortunately, the people at Warner Brothers Games Montreal had the patience and the vision to be able to sit me down and say, let me tell you what we're trying to accomplish here. And it's not that we want you guys to do an impression of Kevin Conroy, an impression of Mark Hamill, simply because we're operating within the same franchise. But if we wanted to do that, we would just get them. What we want to do is we have a unique opportunity to explore a very ambiguous time in the Batman mythos, which is this year 2, and show a younger, more raw, unformed versions of these characters, and then blow up the building.
That was the selling point, actually.
It was the kaboom.
Yeah, exactly. He was like, okay, I'm in.
That was the sound of my mind being blown. So once I found out that's what it was that we were doing, that trepidation and fear was replaced with excitement for what we were going to set out to accomplish.
I mean, I'll tell you what it felt like to be Batman.
Yeah.
No, but just to play off of that, I in the early days, as we were doing our casting, and as we were in these early conversations, there were a couple of characters where it was like, okay, well, we can't kind of just get anyone. And Batman and Joker were kind of those two key characters. We had to get people who understood what we were trying to do, who were passionate about the game, the universe, and the kind of particular story that we were trying to tell. And so beyond the casting, there were meetings that took place, in particular with these guys. I didn't actually go to them, but various high-ranking people in the organization had opportunities to sort of sit down with them and have these conversations, that Troy's mentioning, and then come back to the table and say they get it. They totally get what we're trying to do. They totally get we're not asking them to be, a Mark Hamill sim, and we're not asking them to try and reinvent the character and do something completely different, unlike anything anyone's ever heard from Joker before. But instead, he said it already. Everything that he said, he got in those meetings. And so when ultimately Troy did say yes, there was definitely the feeling like, okay, good, we found our guy. We'll never regret it. And as of yet,
and you haven't.
You have not made us regret it. Keep up the good work.
What else? Fight to the death. Go.
I've heard a lot of games with great cinematics, and I love the cinematics in the Arkham franchise. I was wondering if you could tell us how much cinematic footage is in the game, and what do you do to make it stand out?
Wow, that's I could talk, how long do we have? Because seriously, I could talk for an hour about the cinematic process. We identified cinematics early on as what we at Warner Montreal call a needle mover. It was an opportunity for us to take something that was already great and hopefully bring something new to the table that will be even better, that people will actually point to and say, wow, cinematics in Arkham City were great, cinematics in Arkham Origins are even better. And you know, you can't do that everywhere, right? We can't take the free flow combat system and go, man, we can definitely throw that thing away. We're gonna make something 1,000 times better. It's industry class. There's only so much you can do to add on to kind of perfection. But cinematics was an area where we thought, let's invest a lot in this. And it starts from writing a script and goes through a lot of the similar steps that you would find in making a movie, right? You do your storyboarding and you do your mocking up and you do some sort of pre-vis, not necessarily always with the actors themselves, but some sort of pre-visualization. You bring the script to the recording so that the actors have a sense of something beyond the line that they're actually reading, and they're not just like, okay, I'll say this single thing that you want me to say. You've got to help them. They can talk a lot more about that, but give them some sort of context. And then there's a very long sort of post-production process afterwards, where even when in engine we've got something that looks good and sounds good, you're adding on, you know, the final lighting, the final effects, the final, you know, little details, the little particles of snow, all of the audio cues. You're doing the final music composition, etc. And so, in many instances, our cinematics were the first things that we had to finish in the development process, because the tail end of them are so long. We had these guys recording lines for cinematics that we couldn't change. Like, that's locked last, like, October, you know, like literally like over a year ago, they were recording some of the lines that you guys are going to be playing in a couple of days, because it's a very, very long tail end process. But it was an area that we invested heavily in. And there's a lot to our cinematics that we haven't shown yet. There's a lot of spectacle there, so ask me again in a couple of days and we'll talk some more about it.
I'll speak to that also, just from to toot your horn, if I may.
You can toot my horn.
It wasn't just from a technical standpoint, or yes, the production was very, very long, but the cinematics are very representative of the level of standard that was set for the game internally from within the team, because it was something that they allowed themselves to iterate on and iterate on and iterate on, which is a very dangerous, very expensive thing to do, not just necessarily in dollars, but also in time and in energy of the team, to say, here's our cinematic. But what if we did this, and let's make it better, and let's chop off this, and Eric Holmes, the creative director, said there were monthly, what they call baby killing meetings, which is where this is my baby. This
I
is
made up that term.
It's
That's
lovely.
mine.
You know, you say
Wonderful term,
we
too.
have this baby that we've created, and who's willing to give this up for the sake of the game, for the betterment of the game. So it wasn't just the post-production process, but it was just the commitment that we will not let this game ship until it's not just good enough, but it's the best it can possibly be, or it's perfect.
Yeah, we had to be really brutal towards anything that was trending towards being average.
Yeah.
Anything that was trending towards being average needed, unfortunately, to get a bullet. And so there were mechanics, there were cinematics, there were story elements, there were, you know, lines, there were whole components of the game that looked like they could be okay, but they weren't going to be, you know, spectacle by our own definitions. And so we needed to go in and take an axe to them.
And also, like, how cool are these plastic ice cubes?
I'm taking this one home, man.
That's
This is
insane, man.
mine
It's,
now. You see this? This is mine.
What else? Yes, sir.
Troy, how did you technically approach going forward for Mark Hamill and doing the Ghostbusters?
Sure.
You've done such a marvelous performance. How did you approach that technically?
Technically, what's interesting is that I think it was more about, you find a codex for the character, this keystone that you can lock yourself into, that helps you to understand the character and where that character sits in the story is the main thing. Because if the story is, let's say the story is very comedic, you don't want to be dark and brooding and everything else. You want to have something that fits within our stories. Not very comedic, but you want to find something.
A lot of baby killing.
You want to find something that fits within the story appropriately. And I believe that once you have that, once you understand who the character is, then all of the technicalities and all of the physicalities and everything else will just naturally come out of that. And as opposed to trying to manufacture this performance, it just inherently starts coming out. And a lot of times with that, you'll find something that you couldn't have created. There's something that is just, it's happy accidents. And so there was such a commitment to making sure that we had these characters dialed in before we even really started. So that way, when we're a year forward and we're still recording on the game, that we don't have to come back and try to revisit. We know who these people are.
+1 for the Bob Ross quote, by the way. That was extra good.
You like that?
Happy little accidents. Masterful.
Happy accident. Oh, look at that. That was
There are no such things as mistakes. There's
Of course. Happy accidents.
Well, I'd love to Killing Joke on
Thank you very much. That's a piece of Batman literature that's very near and dear to me, and I was happy to oblige. Very, very nervous to oblige the New York Comic Con crowd. But and the cool thing is that's obviously that's not inside of our game because that time-wise does not take place within that. But there are moments in this game that I equally love, and there's some brilliant writing that I think will stand shoulder to shoulder with that model.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I'll tell the writer.
Yes.
You've both done a lot of video game characters that are original to the game. What's something that you've taken an existing character like Batman or Joker, or giving life to a character that's completely original?
We've talked about this. They both have their own like sort of inherent challenges. I think what did I say earlier? It's almost the difference of you know that people are going to have this reaction of, so who's this guy think he is, versus so who's this guy? and with something as iconic as the Batman franchise, you know there's a tremendous sense of pressure to get it right. But you also don't get to necessarily try to step so far out of the boundaries of the character to make it your own, that you're going to really, define this. But also with a character that nobody's ever seen before, what are you going to do? How do you make this sexy? How do you make it interesting? How do you make it worth watching or playing or whatever it might be? So they're both not necessarily. It's not as if you get to phone one in over the other.
Right.
I would say that with something this huge, the challenge for me is to not think about the enormity of it, simply because at that point I'm in my head. I'm not doing service to the character. I'm not doing what I should be doing for my job, and there's just less. It's more uncharted territory with an original character, but with this, it's just the tremendous sense of pressure to pay honor to the privilege of getting to do this.
And I think that also, you hit on something that's very right. If you're not doing the job, if you start thinking about, oh my God, Heath Ledger's done this character. Oh my God, Mark Hamill's done this character.
George Clooney
has done this character. But at the end of the day, you're still just doing the character, and this character lives inside this story, and it's pretty self-indulgent and egotistical to think that whatever I am going to do is going to take down the very foundation of the Batman legacy. That's 75 years, 3/4 of a century that has been built into this. It's gonna be fine. There's nothing that I can do that can destroy it. At worst, it'll be forgotten, and forgotten quickly. But what I really think that what helps us to be able to stand inside of that institution that is the Batman legacy and mythology is the commitment to the telling of the story, and that everybody that's on this team, 150 people plus, will live and die for this game. And everyone that's on this team has bled for this game. And that's what's going to show up when you guys play it. What else?
Great, thank you very much.
Is that
That's
it?
it?
That was it.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy it, guys.
Streets on Batman!